The wind came first. It always did on Iron Ridge, screaming down from the peaks like something wounded and furious, tearing at the pine trees until they bent sideways, ripping shingles off roofs that weren't built strong enough. Eliza Rowan's cabin was built strong enough. Her father had made sure of that before the consumption took him 2 winters back, before she learned what it meant to split wood until your hands bled, to check trap lines in weather that could kill you in an hour, to go days without hearing another human voice. She didn't mind the silence anymore. Silence was safer than company. Silence didn't lie, didn't take what wasn't theirs, didn't look at a woman alone and see opportunity. The storm hit just after sunset, early, even for November. Eliza had spent the afternoon reinforcing the shutters, hauling in extra firewood, filling every container she owned with water from the pump before the handle froze solid. The sky had gone from gray to black in the space of an hour, and the temperature dropped so fast she could feel it through the cabin walls. She was checking the rifle, an old Henry lever action that had been her father's, that she'd learned to shoot when she was barely tall enough to hold it steady, when she heard it. 3 knocks. Sharp, deliberate, impossible. Eliza froze, the rifle halfway to her shoulder. Nobody came up to Iron Ridge in winter. The trail was barely passable in good weather, and in a storm like this, it was a death sentence. The nearest town was Coldwater, 15 miles down a mountain path that turned into a sheet of ice the moment the sun dropped. Even the trappers who worked the high country knew better than to travel in conditions like this. The knocks came again. Same rhythm. 3 beats, evenly spaced. Not the wind, not a branch. Someone was out there. Eliza's heart kicked hard against her ribs. She moved to the window, staying clear of the direct line to the door, and eased the shutter open just enough to see out. At first there was nothing but white. The snow was coming down so thick it looked solid, a wall of it illuminated by the lantern light spilling from her window. Then a shape moved, dark against the white, too tall to be an animal, too deliberate to be a trick of the storm. A man. And he was carrying something. "Please." The voice came through the door, rough and desperate. I know this is wrong, but please. The boy's dying." Eliza's breath caught. The boy. She should have turned away, should have kept the door barred, the rifle ready, waited for whoever it was to give up and leave. That was survival. That was smart. But her father's voice echoed in her head, the same words he'd said 100 times when she was growing up. "You can't let the mountain make you hard all the way through, Ellie. The day you stop seeing people in trouble is the day you stop being people yourself." Her hand was on the bar before she'd made a conscious decision. "Step back from the door," she called out. "I'm armed." "I'm stepping back." She lifted the bar, keeping the rifle trained on the door as she pulled it open. The wind hit her like a fist, driving snow into her face hard enough to sting. The man was 3 feet back, swaying slightly, his hat pulled low and his coat crusted with ice. In his arms was a bundle wrapped in what looked like a horse blanket, and from the blanket, a small hand hung limp. Eliza's stomach turned over. "Inside," she said. "Now." The man didn't argue. He stumbled through the door, and Eliza slammed it shut behind him, throwing the bar back in place. The temperature in the cabin had already dropped 10 degrees. Up close, the man looked worse. His face was wind-burned raw, his lips cracked and bleeding. Ice clung to his eyebrows, his beard, the edges of his collar. But it was his eyes that caught her, dark, exhausted, but sharp, alert. The eyes of someone who'd learned not to relax. "The table," Eliza said, nodding toward the rough-hewn table her father had built. "Put him down." The man moved carefully, lowering the bundle onto the table like it was made of glass. When he pulled the blanket back, Eliza's breath stopped. The boy couldn't have been more than 7 or 8. His face was pale as paper, his lips blue. His eyes were closed, and for a horrible moment, Eliza thought he was already gone. Then his chest moved, barely. "How long's he been like this?" she asked, already moving, pulling the blanket away to check for injuries. "Since this afternoon, we were trying to make it to Coldwater, but the storm came up fast. Horses went down about a mile back." The man's voice was steady, but there was an edge to it. Fear, barely controlled. "I carried him as far as I could. Saw your light." Eliza's hands moved automatically, checking the boy's pulse, thready but present, lifting his eyelids to check his pupils. She'd learned basic field medicine from her father, who'd learned it from a decade of logging camps and mining towns where the nearest doctor was a week's ride away. Frostbite on his fingers, she said. Maybe his toes. Hypothermia, definitely. We need to warm him up slow or we'll kill him. She glanced up at the man. You got frostbite too? Probably, doesn't matter. It will when your fingers fall off. Sit down before you collapse. The man didn't sit. I need to see to the horses. Your horses are dead. In this weather, if they went down, they're not getting back up. Eliza's voice was flat. You want to help the boy? You sit down and let me work. For a moment, she thought he was going to argue. Then he nodded once and lowered himself into the chair by the fire, moving like every joint hurt. Eliza turned back to the boy. She worked quickly, stripping off his wet clothes, wrapping him in dry blankets from her own bed, building up the fire until the cabin was almost uncomfortably warm. She made a weak broth from dried venison and got a few spoonfuls into him, enough to get some heat into his core. His color started to improve. Barely, but enough. The man watched without speaking. He'd taken off his coat and hat, revealing dark hair streaked with gray and a face that was younger than she'd thought. 40, maybe. Hard to tell under the damage the cold had done. What's his name? Eliza asked. Eli. Yours? A pause. Too long. Caleb Vance. Eliza didn't miss the hesitation, didn't comment on it either. Where were you headed, Caleb Vance? West. Looking for work. In winter? Bad timing. Another lie. Or at least not the whole truth. But Eliza had learned a long time ago that everyone had secrets. She had her own. She finished with the boy, Eli, and turned her attention to Caleb. His hands were in bad shape, the fingers white and waxy. She brought a basin of cool water, not warm, not yet, and made him soak them. This is gonna hurt, she said. I know. He didn't make a sound when the pain hit, but she saw his jaw tighten, the tendons standing out in his neck. She'd seen grown men cry over less. You done this before, he said after a moment. Statement, not question. My father was a logger, saw frostbite plenty. Eliza kept her voice neutral. You're lucky. Another hour and you'd have lost the fingers. Seems like we're lucky you were here. Seems like you're lucky you knocked on the right door. Eliza met his eyes. Not everyone would have opened it. I know, thank you. The words were simple, but there was weight behind them. Eliza nodded and turned away, uncomfortable with the gratitude. She wasn't used to it. Wasn't used to people, period. The storm howled outside, shaking the cabin. Inside, the fire crackled, and the boy's breathing slowly, painfully began to even out. 3 days, Eliza said, not looking at Caleb. Storm like this, it'll blow itself out in 3 days. You can rest here till then. After that, you're gone. Understood. She finally looked at him. I don't know what you're running from, and I don't want to know, but if you brought trouble to my door, I need to hear it now. Caleb's expression didn't change, but something flickered in his eyes. No trouble. Another lie. Eliza could taste it. But the boy was barely breathing. The storm was trying to tear the mountain apart, and she was too damn tired to push. Fine, she said. But the first sign something's wrong, you're out. I don't care if it's still snowing. Fair enough? Eliza turned away, moving to the stove to heat more water. Her hands were shaking, from adrenaline or fear or something else, she wasn't sure. She'd just let 2 strangers into her home. In winter, on Iron Ridge, where isolation was the only thing keeping her safe. Her father would have said she did the right thing. Her father was dead. The first night was the worst. Eli's fever spiked around midnight, and for 2 hours, Eliza wasn't sure he was going to make it. She kept him cool with wet cloths, forced more broth down his throat, watched his chest rise and fall in stuttering rhythm. Caleb didn't sleep. He sat by the boy's side, one hand resting on his shoulder, his face carved from stone. Eliza wanted to tell him to rest, that he'd be useless if he collapsed, but something about the way he looked at the boy stopped her. This wasn't just some kid he'd picked up. This mattered. He your son? She asked quietly. Caleb's jaw tightened. No. Then who is he? Someone who needed help. Eliza studied him in the firelight. You make a habit of risking your life for strangers? Sometimes. His eyes didn't leave the boy. You just did. Fair point. The fever broke just before dawn. Eli's breathing steadied, his color improved, and when Eliza checked his pulse, it was stronger. Still weak, but stronger. "He's gonna make it," she said. Caleb's shoulders dropped, the tension draining out of him all at once. For a moment, he looked like he might break. But then he pulled it back, locked it down. "Thank you," he said again. Eliza just nodded. She was exhausted, her eyes gritty with lack of sleep, her back aching from hours bent over the table. But there was work to do. There was always work to do. She put coffee on the stove. Real coffee, a luxury she allowed herself once a week, and started breakfast. Salt pork and cornmeal mush, nothing fancy, but it was hot and filling. Caleb ate like a man who hadn't seen food in days, which he probably hadn't. Outside, the storm continued. If anything, it had gotten worse. "How much food you have?" Caleb asked. "Enough for one person for the winter. For 3. Maybe a month if we're careful." He nodded slowly. "I can hunt. Once the storm clears. Not much game this high up this time of year. Everything with sense moved down the mountain weeks ago. I'll find something." Eliza didn't argue. She'd learned that some men needed to feel useful, needed to contribute. It was pride, or maybe something deeper, the need to not be a burden. She understood that. "Your fence is broken," Caleb said after a moment. "North side. Saw it when I came up." Eliza's hand stilled on the coffee cup. "I know. I can fix it." "You just said you'd hunt. I can do both." He met her eyes. "I'm good with my hands, carpentry, metalwork, whatever needs doing. Let me earn my keep." Eliza wanted to say no, wanted to keep the distance, the boundaries. But the fence had been broken since last spring, and she hadn't had the materials or the energy to fix it, and if he was going to be here for 3 days anyway. "Fine," she said. "Tools are in the shed. Lumber too, what's left of it." Caleb nodded and stood, moving to the window. He stood there for a long moment, staring out at the white wall of the storm. "Something wrong?" Eliza asked. "No," but his voice was tight. "Just making sure nobody followed us." Eliza's stomach went cold. "You said there was no trouble." "There isn't. I'm just careful." He was lying. She was sure of it now. But before she could push, Eli stirred on the table, making a small sound. Caleb was at his side in an instant, and Eliza let it go. For now. The storm didn't break in 3 days. It took 5. 5 days of wind that screamed like something dying, snow that piled up past the windows, cold that seeped through the walls, no matter how high Eliza built the fire. 5 days of rationing food, melting snow for water, keeping Eli alive and warm. And 5 days of Caleb Vance. He was quiet, mostly. Didn't talk much unless Eliza asked him a direct question. But he worked, constantly. Fixed the fence, even in the storm, coming back inside with ice in his beard and his hands so cold they were clumsy. Repaired the broken shutter on the east window, sharpened all her tools, split enough firewood to last another month. He moved through the cabin like he was trying to disappear, to take up as little space as possible. But Eliza noticed things. The way he always positioned himself between the door and Eli. The way his hand moved to his hip whenever there was a sound outside, even though he wasn't armed. The way he never fully relaxed, even when he was sitting by the fire. And she noticed the scars. On his hands, his forearms, one that ran along his jaw. The kind of scars you got from fighting, not working. On the 3rd day, she asked him about it. "You were in the war?" Caleb looked up from the piece of harness leather he was mending, another task he'd found without being asked. "Which one?" "The only one that matters." A slight smile, humorless. "Yeah, I was in it." "Which side?" "Does it matter?" "Not really, but I'm curious." He was quiet for a long moment. "Union, 4th Cavalry." Eliza nodded. Her father had been too old to fight, but she'd known plenty of men who'd gone. Some came back. Most didn't. The ones who did were never quite the same. "That where you learned to handle yourself?" she asked, among other things. "And the boy? He in the war too?" Caleb's expression shuddered. "No. But you found him because of it." It wasn't a question, and Caleb didn't answer, just went back to mending the leather, his hands moving with the kind of practiced ease that came from years of work. Eliza let it drop. Whatever the story was, he wasn't ready to tell it. Maybe he never would be. But she was starting to piece it together anyway. A man running with a child who wasn't his. A man who checked the horizon like he expected devils to come riding over it. A man who lied about his name. Whatever trouble he'd brought with him, it was big. On the fourth day, Eli woke up. Eliza was checking the traps near the cabin. A futile effort in the storm, but she needed to move, needed air, when she heard Caleb call her name. She ran. Inside, Eli was sitting up on the makeshift bed they'd made for him near the fire. His eyes were open, confused and frightened, darting around the unfamiliar cabin. "Hey," Caleb said softly, his hand on the boy's shoulder. "You're safe. It's okay." Eli's eyes found him and locked on, recognition flooding his face. "Caleb? I'm here. Where are we?" "Somewhere safe, with someone who helped us." Eli's gaze shifted to Eliza, standing in the doorway with snow still clinging to her coat. He shrank back slightly. "It's okay," Caleb said again. "This is Miss Rowan. She's the reason you're alive." Eliza moved slowly, keeping her movements careful. She'd seen enough frightened animals to know how to approach without spooking them. "How do you feel?" she asked. Eli's voice was small. "Cold. That'll pass. You hungry?" A nod. Eliza moved to the stove, ladling out soup she'd had simmering. Nothing fancy, just broth with some wild onions and the last of the dried venison, but Eli ate it like it was a feast. Caleb watched him with an expression Eliza couldn't quite read. Relief, yes, but something else. Something that looked almost like grief. "Thank you," Eli said quietly when he'd finished, looking at Eliza. His voice was hoarse, barely above a whisper. "You're welcome." "Are we staying here?" "Just till the storm passes," Caleb said. "Then we're moving on." "Where?" "West, like we planned." Eli nodded, but Eliza saw the flicker of doubt in his eyes. The boy didn't believe they were going west, and Eliza was starting to suspect he was right. Chum. The storm finally broke on the fifth day. Eliza woke to silence. Real silence, not the screaming wind. She got up, stiff from sleeping on the floor by the fire, and opened the door. The world had been transformed. Snow covered everything, smooth and white and pristine. The trees were loaded with it, their branches bent low. The sky was clear and hard and blue. The kind of blue you only saw after a storm, when the air was scrubbed clean. It was beautiful. It was also a problem. "We should go," Caleb said from behind her. He'd been up for hours already. She could tell. Probably hadn't slept at all. "You can't," Eliza said, not turning around. "Look at it. That snow's 4 feet deep in places. You won't make it a mile before you're exhausted. And the boy's not strong enough. We've already stayed too long." "You've stayed as long as you needed to." Eliza finally looked at him. "Another day or two won't make a difference." "It might." "To who? Who's coming, Caleb?" His jaw tightened, but he didn't answer. Eliza stepped closer, lowering her voice so Eli, still asleep by the fire, wouldn't hear. "I've kept my mouth shut because it wasn't my business. But if someone's coming here because of you, it becomes my business real fast. So I'm asking you straight, what kind of trouble are you in?" For a long moment, Caleb said nothing. Then, "The kind where the less you know, the safer you are." "That's not an answer. It's the only one I've got." They stared at each other. Eliza wanted to push, wanted to demand the truth, but she saw something in his eyes that stopped her. Not defiance, not anger, fear. He was terrified, not for himself, for Eli. "One more day," she said finally. "Give the boy one more day to get his strength back. Then you can go, and I won't ask questions." Caleb looked like he wanted to argue, but he nodded. "One more day." That afternoon, Eliza found Eli standing at the window, staring out at the snow. "Pretty, isn't it?" she said. Eli jumped, startled. "Sorry, I didn't mean—" "It's fine. You're allowed to look." The boy relaxed slightly. Up close, in the daylight, Eliza could see details she'd missed before. He was small for his age, too thin, with dark circles under his eyes that spoke of months of poor sleep. His clothes were decent quality, but worn, patched in places. "Can I ask you something?" Eli said quietly. "Sure." "Why did you let us in?" Eliza considered the question. "Because you needed help." "But you don't know us." "No. And we could be dangerous." "You could be." Eliza smiled slightly. But I've got a rifle and you're 8 years old. I'll take my chances. Eli almost smiled back. Almost. Caleb says we have to leave tomorrow, he said. I know. I wish we could stay longer. His voice was so quiet, Eliza almost missed it. It's nice here. Something twisted in Eliza's chest. When was the last time someone had said that? When was the last time she'd thought of this place as anything but a cage, a necessity, a place to survive rather than live? Where are you going? She asked. Really? Eli's expression shuddered, and for a moment he looked exactly like Caleb. West. Another lie. But Eliza didn't push. That night she made a real meal, the last of her stores for something this extravagant, but it felt important somehow. Venison stew with potatoes and carrots she'd been saving, biscuits made with the last of the flour, even a small portion of the honey she'd been rationing since summer. They ate together at the table, the three of them, and for a little while it felt almost normal, almost like a family. Caleb told a story about a horse he'd owned during the war, a cantankerous mare who'd kicked a general and somehow gotten away with it. Eli laughed, a real laugh, bright and surprised, like he'd forgotten he knew how. Eliza found herself laughing too. When was the last time she'd laughed? When was the last time she hadn't been alone? Later, after Eli had fallen asleep and Caleb was checking the door for the third time that hour, Eliza spoke. You're good with him. Caleb glanced back. I try. He's not yours, but you care for him like he is. Someone has to. What happened to his family? Caleb's expression went carefully blank. They're gone. And you just took him? Something like that. Eliza waited, but he didn't elaborate. After a moment, she tried a different approach. You ever think about settling down somewhere, putting down roots? I did, once. His voice was flat. Didn't work out. What happened? I lost them. He said it simply, without emotion, but Eliza heard the weight behind the words. My wife. My daughter. Fever took them both in the same week. Eliza's breath caught. I'm sorry. Caleb shrugged, a tight, brittle gesture. It was a long time ago. Doesn't make it easier. No. He was quiet for a moment. That's when I left. Sold everything. Walked away from everything. Figured I'd head west, find work, start over somewhere nobody knew me. And Eli? Found him in a mining camp 3 months ago. His parents were dead and the camp boss was working him 12 hours a day in the tunnels. 8 years old, and they had him in the tunnels. Caleb's voice went hard. So I took him. Didn't ask permission, just took him. You kidnapped him. I saved him. Those aren't always different things. Caleb met her eyes. Would you have left him there? Eliza thought about it. About a child in the darkness, working himself to death because no one cared enough to stop it. No, she said quietly. I wouldn't have. Then we're the same. Maybe they were. They stood in silence for a moment, the fire crackling between them. Tomorrow, Caleb said, we leave at first light. I know. Thank you for everything. You already thanked me. I know, but I mean it. He looked at her, really looked at her, and Eliza felt something shift in her chest. You didn't have to help us. Most people wouldn't have. I'm not most people. No, you're not. The way he said it made Eliza's face warm. She turned away, busying herself with banking the fire. Get some sleep, she said. You'll need your strength tomorrow. What about you? I'll sleep when you're gone. She felt him watching her for a moment longer. Then he moved away, settling onto the floor near Eli's makeshift bed. Eliza sat by the fire, listening to the wind starting to pick up again outside, and tried not to think about how empty the cabin was going to feel tomorrow. Tried not to think about how, for the first time in 2 years, she'd felt something other than numbness. Tried not to think about how much she was going to miss 2 strangers she barely knew. But she did think about it, all night long. Bus. They were supposed to leave at first light. Eliza woke before dawn, the cabin still dark except for the dim glow of embers in the fireplace. She could hear Caleb moving quietly, gathering their few belongings, checking Eli's boots to make sure they were dry. The boy was still asleep, curled under the blankets, his face peaceful in a way it hadn't been when he'd first arrived. She should have stayed in bed, should have let them go without ceremony, without prolonging something that was already over. But she got up anyway. "Coffee?" she offered, keeping her voice low. Caleb looked up, surprised. "You don't have to." "I know." She put the pot on anyway, measuring out the grounds with the same careful precision she did everything. Outside, the sky was starting to lighten. Not sunrise yet, but that gray pre-dawn glow that meant morning was coming whether you were ready for it or not. They drank in silence. Caleb had packed everything they'd brought, which wasn't much. A bedroll, a saddlebag with a change of clothes for Eli, a canteen. That was it. Everything else had been lost with the horses. "It's a long walk to Coldwater," Eliza said finally. "We'll manage." "In that snow? With a boy who was half dead a week ago?" Caleb's jaw tightened. "We don't have a choice." "Everyone has a choice." "Not me. Not about this." Eliza wanted to argue, wanted to tell him he was being stubborn and stupid and he was going to get that boy killed, but she could see it in his face. The decision was already made. Had been made long before he knocked on her door. "At least take some food," she said. "I've got venison jerky, some hardtack. It's not much, but it'll keep you going." Eliza, "Don't argue. You saved my firewood pile by splitting all that extra. Call it payment." He looked like he wanted to refuse. Pride, probably, but he nodded. She packed what she could spare into a cloth sack. More than she could spare, really, but the thought of them going hungry made something twist in her chest. She added the last of the honey, a small bag of cornmeal, even the good knife she kept for skinning game. "That's too much," Caleb said when he saw it. "It's what I'm giving you. Take it or leave it." He took it. By the time the sun crested the ridge, Eli was awake and dressed. He looked better, still pale, still too thin, but his eyes were clearer, alive. "Ready?" Caleb asked him. Eli nodded, but his gaze drifted to Eliza. "Thank you, Miss Rowan, for everything." "You're welcome, Eli. I hope—" He stopped, swallowed. "I hope we meet again sometime." Eliza's throat tightened. "Me too." Caleb shouldered the pack, checked the door one last time out of habit, then looked at Eliza. For a moment, neither of them spoke. There were things she wanted to say, warnings, questions, things she didn't have words for. But what came out was simpler. "Be careful." "Always am." "No, you're not. If you were, you wouldn't be here." A ghost of a smile. "Fair point." He held out his hand. Eliza shook it, feeling the calluses, the strength. His grip was firm, warm. "If you're ever back this way," she started. "I won't be." The words hit harder than they should have. "Right." Caleb's expression softened slightly. "But if I were, this would be the first place I'd stop." It wasn't much, but it was something. They left. Eliza stood in the doorway, watching them make their way down the trail, two dark shapes against the blinding white of the snow. Eli looked back once, raising his hand in a small wave. She waved back. Then they disappeared around the bend, and she was alone again. The silence rushed back in like water filling a hole. Eliza closed the door. The cabin felt cavernous. Every corner seemed to echo. The blankets Eli had slept in were folded neatly by the fire. The chair Caleb had sat in was pushed back against the table. It was like they'd never been there at all. Except they had been. And now they weren't. Eliza picked up the coffee pot, still warm, and poured herself another cup, even though she didn't want it. Just something to do. Something to keep her hands busy. She'd lived alone for 2 years. She was good at it. She didn't need company, didn't need conversation, didn't need— The cup slipped from her hand and shattered on the floor. She stared at the pieces, the dark coffee spreading across the wood, and felt something crack inside her chest. 2 years she'd been fine. 2 years she'd convinced herself that this was enough, that survival was enough, that she didn't need anything more than these 4 walls and the mountain and the silence. 5 days. 5 days with 2 strangers, and suddenly the silence felt like drowning. "Damn it," she whispered. She cleaned up the mess, swept the broken ceramic into the fire, mopped up the coffee. Then she dressed for the cold, grabbed her rifle, and headed out to check the trap lines. Work. That's what she needed. Work would fix it. Work always fixed it. Except this time it didn't. She walked the lines in a daze, barely seeing the traps, the trees, the snow. Her mind kept circling back to the cabin, to the sound of Eli's laugh, to the way Caleb had looked at her when he said thank you, like he meant it. She'd been alone so long she'd forgotten what it felt like to matter to someone. And now she remembered. And it hurt. By the time she got back to the cabin, the sun was high and bright, and she was exhausted in a way that had nothing to do with the walk. She fed the fire, ate some cold cornmeal because she couldn't be bothered to cook, and sat down in her father's chair. The same chair she'd sat in every day for 2 years. It felt different now. Everything felt different now. She lasted 3 days. 3 days of telling herself it was fine, she was fine, this was just the adjustment back to normal. 3 days of working herself into exhaustion, trying not to think. 3 days of lying awake at night, listening to the wind and remembering the sound of someone else breathing in the darkness. On the morning of the 4th day, she heard horses. Eliza was at the woodpile, splitting logs with the axe Caleb had sharpened when the sound carried up from the trail. Multiple horses. Moving fast, her stomach dropped. She'd lived on Iron Ridge long enough to know that nobody came up here without a reason. And the only reason people came in numbers was trouble. She dropped the axe and ran for the cabin, grabbing the rifle from above the door. Through the window, she could see them now, 4 riders, picking their way up the trail. They were still a quarter-mile out, but closing. Eliza's mind raced. Could be hunters. Could be travelers who'd lost their way. Could be... No. Hunters didn't ride in a group like that. Didn't move with that kind of purpose. These men were looking for something. Or someone. She checked the rifle's load, made sure the bar was secure on the door, and positioned herself by the window where she could see without being seen. The riders reached the clearing in front of the cabin and stopped. 3 of them hung back, but the 4th dismounted. A tall man in an expensive coat, his hat pristine despite the trail. Even from a distance, Eliza could see he didn't belong up here. Everything about him screamed money and city and power. He looked at the cabin like he was appraising it. Then he smiled. Eliza's blood went cold. The man walked forward, his boots crunching in the snow, and knocked on the door. 3 sharp raps. Same rhythm Caleb had used. "Miss Rowan?" His voice was smooth, educated. "My name is Victor Hale. I'd like a moment of your time, if I may." Eliza didn't move. "I know you're in there, Miss Rowan. Your fire's smoking, and those are fresh footprints by the woodpile. I'm not here to cause trouble. I just want to talk." "About what?" Eliza called back, not opening the door. "About your property, and about the 2 men who were here last week." The bottom dropped out of Eliza's world. "I don't know what you're talking about," she said. "Of course you don't." Victor's tone was amused. "Just like you don't know about the man and boy who left tracks all over your clearing, or the extra firewood that's been split, or the fence that was recently repaired." He paused. "You're not a very good liar, Miss Rowan." Eliza's grip tightened on the rifle. "Get off my land." "I will. As soon as we talk. I promise, this will only take a moment." She didn't trust him. Didn't trust his smile or his smooth voice, or the fact that he'd brought 3 other men with him. But she also knew that if he wanted to force his way in, there wasn't much she could do to stop him. Better to face him on her terms. She unbarred the door but kept the rifle visible. "Say what you came to say." Victor's smile widened. "Thank you. May I come in?" "No." "Fair enough." He didn't seem bothered. "I'll be brief. I'm a land broker, Miss Rowan. I work for the Western Pacific Railroad, acquiring property for their expansion. The railroad is coming through this valley, and your land is directly in the path." Eliza's stomach clenched. "My land's not for sale." "Everything's for sale at the right price." "Not this. My father built this cabin. He's buried on this land. I'm not leaving." Victor's expression didn't change, but something flickered in his eyes. "I understand sentiment, Miss Rowan, truly. But sentiment doesn't stop progress. The railroad is coming whether you sell or not. The question is whether you get compensated fairly or whether you get nothing." "You can't just take my land." "Actually, I can. Eminent domain. The law is quite clear on this." He pulled a folded paper from his coat. "This is a formal offer. $500 for the property and all structures. It's more than generous." $500. It was more money than Eliza had seen in her entire life. And it was nothing. This land was worth 10 times that, maybe more, if the railroad wanted it bad enough. I'm not selling, she said again. Victor sighed, tucking the paper back into his coat. I was afraid you'd say that. Which brings me to my second point. He looked at her directly. The man who was here. Tall, dark hair, traveling with a boy. Where did he go? I don't know what you're... Please don't insult my intelligence. He was here. His tracks are everywhere. What I need to know is where he went. Eliza's mind raced. Why was Victor looking for Caleb? What had he done? He didn't say, she said carefully. He stayed during the storm, then left. That's all I know. Which direction? West. How long ago? 4 days. Victor studied her face, and Eliza had the uncomfortable feeling he could see right through her. You're protecting him. I'm telling you what I know. Do you know who he is? He said his name was Caleb Vance. Victor laughed, a sharp, humorless sound. Is that what he told you? Caleb Vance? He shook his head. That man's name is Caleb Harrison, and he's worth a lot of money to a lot of people. Harrison. The name hit Eliza like a fist. Harrison was one of the biggest railroad families in the territory. She'd heard the name even up here, in stories about fortunes made and lives destroyed. If you're lying, she started. I'm not. Caleb Harrison, heir to the Harrison Railroad fortune. He disappeared 3 years ago after his family died. Left everything behind, the money, the business, the name. People have been looking for him ever since. Eliza's head spun. The quiet man who'd fixed her fence, who'd carried a boy through a blizzard, who'd thanked her for a cup of coffee. He was railroad royalty? Why are you looking for him? She asked. Victor's smile was cold. Because his family's company merged with mine 2 years ago, and there are certain legal complications that require his signature. Finding him would be very profitable for everyone involved. He doesn't want to be found. What he wants is irrelevant. Victor's tone hardened. Tell me where he went, Miss Rowan, and I'll double my offer for your land. $1,000. Enough to buy a nice property in town. Start over somewhere easier. $1,000. And all she had to do was betray a man who'd helped her, who trusted her enough to stay under her roof. No, Eliza said. Victor's expression darkened. You're making a mistake. It's my mistake to make. Is it worth your land? Because I will take it, Miss Rowan, one way or another. Then take it, but I'm not helping you find him. They stared at each other. Eliza kept the rifle steady, her finger near the trigger, not pointing it at him, not yet, but making sure he saw it. Finally, Victor stepped back. You have 2 weeks to reconsider. After that, the offer expires. And I start taking steps to claim this property through legal channels. He turned to mount his horse, then paused. One more thing. If Harrison contacts you, you'd be wise to let me know. Harboring a fugitive is a serious crime. He's not a fugitive. He took that boy without permission. That's kidnapping, Miss Rowan. The mine owner has a warrant for his arrest. Victor swung into the saddle. Think about that. Think about what helping him might cost you. He rode away, his men following. Eliza watched until they disappeared down the trail, then sagged against the doorframe. Her hands were shaking. Caleb Harrison, railroad heir, fugitive, and she'd let him walk away without answers. She went back inside, barred the door, and sat down hard in her father's chair. Her mind was racing, trying to piece together the fragments. Caleb had lost his wife and daughter. He'd walked away from a fortune. He'd taken Eli from a mining camp. He'd lied about his name, but he'd also fixed her fence, chopped her wood, looked at Eli like the boy was the only thing in the world worth saving. Which version was real? Maybe both. Maybe that was the problem. Eliza didn't sleep that night. She kept the rifle close and the fire burning, jumping at every sound. When dawn finally came, gray and cold, she made a decision. She was going to Coldwater, not to find Victor, not to sell her land, but to find out the truth about Caleb Harrison. Because if men like Victor Hale were hunting him, if there were warrants and legal complications and railroad fortunes at stake, then Caleb and Eli were in more danger than she'd thought. And for reasons she couldn't fully explain, that mattered to her. She packed light, some food, the rifle, ammunition, her father's old coat that was too big but warmer than hers. She wrote a note and left it on the table, though she wasn't sure who it was for. Maybe herself. Maybe her father's ghost? Gone to town. Back in 3 days. If I'm not, the cabin's yours. Then she locked the door and started down the mountain. The trail was brutal. The snow had settled some, but it was still deep enough to make every step work. By the time she reached the halfway point, her legs were burning and her breath came in white clouds. She kept going. Cold water appeared in the valley below like a smudge of smoke and buildings against the white landscape. It wasn't much of a town, maybe 200 people, most of them miners or loggers, or people who serviced the miners and loggers. But it had a telegraph office, a land office, and a sheriff. That's where she went first. Sheriff Tom Briggs was a broad, weathered man in his 50s who'd known Eliza's father. He looked up when she walked in, surprise crossing his face. "Eliza Rowan, haven't seen you in near 2 years." "Been busy, I'd imagine. What brings you down?" Eliza closed the door behind her. "I need information about a man named Caleb Harrison." Briggs' expression went carefully neutral. "Why?" "Because Victor Hale came to my cabin asking about him, and I want to know what I'm dealing with." The sheriff was quiet for a moment, then gestured to a chair. "Sit down." She sat. Briggs leaned back, rubbing his jaw. "Caleb Harrison. Haven't heard that name in a few years. He came through here once, maybe 3 years back. Didn't cause trouble, kept to himself. Then he disappeared." He paused. "Word is he left his whole life behind after his family died. Fever, I heard. Wife and daughter, both gone in a week. That part I know. What about the boy? Eli." "The boy from the Blackstone mine?" Briggs nodded slowly. "Yeah, I know about that. Mine owner reported the boy missing about 4 months ago. Said a drifter took him. Description matched Harrison." "Is there a warrant?" "Technically, yes. For taking a minor without consent, but—" Briggs hesitated. "Between you and me, the Blackstone operation isn't exactly legal. They've got kids working in those tunnels, conditions that'd make you sick. I've tried to shut them down, but they've got friends in high places. If Harrison took the boy out of there, I'm not losing sleep over it." "But Hale is." "Hale's a different animal. He doesn't care about the boy. He cares about Harrison." Briggs leaned forward. "See, when Harrison disappeared, he left his shares in the family company, but he never formally transferred them. That means legally, he's still a shareholder. And when his company merged with Hale's outfit, those shares became very valuable. If Hale can find Harrison and get him to sign them over, or prove he's abandoned them, Hale stands to make a fortune." Eliza felt sick. "So this isn't about justice. It's about money. It's always about money. What happens if Hale finds him?" "Depends on how cooperative Harrison is. If he signs, Hale leaves him alone. If he doesn't," Briggs shrugged. "Hale's not a violent man, but he's ruthless. He'll use every legal trick he's got. And if Harrison's traveling with a kidnapped boy, that gives Hale leverage." Eliza stood abruptly. "Where would Harrison go if he wanted to disappear? West, probably. There's still frontier out there, places a man can lose himself." "Why?" "Because Hale asked me where Harrison went, and I didn't tell him. Which means Hale's going to keep looking, and if he finds them, then that boy's going back to the mines, and Harrison's going back to a life he clearly doesn't want." Briggs studied her. "Why do you care, Eliza? You barely know these people." "That was the question, wasn't it?" "They needed help," she said finally, "so I helped them, and now I need to know they're going to be okay." Briggs was quiet for a long moment. Then he pulled a map from his desk drawer and spread it out. "If I were a man trying to disappear, I'd head for the territories, Montana maybe, or further, Canada. Somewhere without railroads, without telegraph lines. Somewhere men like Hale don't have reach." He pointed to a spot on the map. "There's a settlement called Broken Creek, about 100 miles west. It's rough, but it's off the main routes. If Harrison's smart, he'd stop there, rest up, figure out his next move." "Voici espoir à Siendan." Eliza studied the map, memorizing the route. "Thank you," she said. "Eliza," Briggs's voice stopped her at the door. "Whatever you're thinking of doing, be careful. Hale's got resources, and he's not going to forget that you didn't help him." "I know. Your land is mine, and I'm not giving it up without a fight." She left before he could argue. Outside, the temperature had dropped, and the sky was turning that particular gray that meant more snow. Eliza pulled her coat tighter and started toward the general store. She needed supplies if she was going to make the trip west. Food, ammunition, Maybe a horse if she could afford one. She was halfway there when someone stepped in front of her. A man. Mid-30s, lean and hard-looking, with a deputy's badge pinned to his coat. "Miss Rowan?" Eliza stopped. "Yes? Name's Garrett. I work for Mr. Hale. He'd like a word." "I already talked to him." "He'd like another word." It wasn't a request. Eliza's hand moved toward the rifle slung over her shoulder, but Garrett was faster. He grabbed her wrist, his grip like iron. "Don't," he said quietly. "I don't want to hurt you, but I will if I have to. Let go of me. Soon as you agree to come peacefully." Eliza considered her options. She could fight, but Garrett was bigger and probably armed. She could scream, but who would help her? Half the town was probably on Hale's payroll. "Fine," she said through gritted teeth. Garrett released her wrist and gestured down the street. "This way." They walked to the nicest building in Coldwater, the hotel, 3 stories of painted wood that looked absurdly out of place among the rough mining structures. Garrett led her inside, past a desk clerk who didn't even look up, and up the stairs to the top floor. He knocked on a door at the end of the hall. "Come in," Victor's voice called. Garrett opened the door and nudged Eliza inside. The room was spacious, well-furnished, with a view of the whole town. Victor stood by the window, holding a glass of whiskey. "Miss Rowan, thank you for coming." "I didn't have a choice." "Everyone has a choice." He gestured to a chair. "Please, sit." Eliza remained standing. Victor smiled. "Stubborn. I appreciate that, actually. It's a rare quality these days." He took a sip of whiskey. "I assume you've been asking about Harrison. That's why you're in town." "That's my business." "It became my business when you refused to cooperate." Victor set down his glass. "Let me be clear, Miss Rowan. I don't enjoy being difficult, but I need to find Caleb Harrison, and you're my best lead. So I'm going to ask you one more time, where did he go? And I'm going to tell you one more time, I don't know." "You're lying." "Prove it." Victor's expression hardened. "You're protecting a criminal, a man who kidnapped a child. Do you understand what that makes you?" "Someone with a conscience?" "An accomplice." The word hung in the air between them. "I could have you arrested," Victor continued, "right now. Harboring a fugitive, interfering with a lawful investigation. The sheriff might not like it, but he'll do it if I push hard enough." "Then push." Victor studied her for a long moment. Then he laughed, genuinely amused. "You really don't care, do you? About the money, the threats, any of it. I care about doing what's right. And you think protecting Harrison is right? I think that boy deserves better than being worked to death in a mine, and I think Harrison's the only one who cared enough to do something about it. Even if it was illegal?" "Especially because it was illegal, because it means he cared more about that kid than he did about staying safe." Victor was quiet. Then he moved to the desk, pulled out a leather folder, and extracted a photograph. He handed it to Eliza. It was a family portrait, a man, a woman, and a little girl, maybe 5 years old. The man was younger, cleaner, but unmistakably Caleb. The woman was beautiful, smiling. The girl looked like both of them. "That's what he lost," Victor said quietly. "His whole world. And when they died, something in him broke. He walked away from everything, the business, the wealth, his name. Just vanished." He took the photograph back. "I'm not trying to destroy him, Miss Rowan. I'm trying to bring him back, to help him. By threatening him with legal action? By giving him a reason to come back. The company needs him. And whether he wants to admit it or not, he needs the company, that money, that power. It can do good. It can help people like Eli. Eli doesn't need money. He needs safety. He needs someone who cares. And you think Harrison can provide that while running for the rest of his life?" Eliza didn't have an answer for that. Victor took her silence as victory. "I'm not asking you to betray him. I'm asking you to help me help him. Tell me where he went, and I'll make sure both he and the boy are taken care of. No arrests, no mines. Just a chance to build a real life." It sounded reasonable, logical. It sounded like a trap. "No," Eliza said. Victor's face went cold. "Then you leave me no choice. As of this moment, I'm filing formal eminent domain proceedings against your property. You have 30 days to vacate. After that, the land belongs to the railroad." You can't. I can, and I will. He moved to the door, opening it. Garrett will escort you out. I suggest you use the next 30 days to reconsider your position, because once that deadline passes, you'll have nothing. No land, no home, and no leverage. Eliza wanted to argue, to fight, to do something, but Garrett was already there, his hand on her arm, guiding her toward the door. One more thing, Victor said as she left. When Harrison realizes what his stubbornness cost you, tell him to come find me. We'll talk then. The door closed. Garrett walked her back downstairs and out onto the street. The moment he released her, Eliza started walking, not toward the general store, not toward the sheriff's office, but toward the edge of town. Her hands were shaking, not from fear, from rage. 30 days. 30 days to give up everything or lose it anyway. Unless she found Caleb first, unless she warned him what was coming, unless she figured out a way to stop Victor Hale before he destroyed everything. She didn't have a plan, didn't have resources, didn't even have a horse. But she had one thing Victor didn't. She knew what it meant to survive, and she was done running. Eliza made it 2 miles out of Coldwater before the reality of what she was doing hit her. She was walking west with a rifle, a small pack of supplies she'd managed to buy with the last of her savings, and absolutely no idea how to find 2 people who didn't want to be found in 100 miles of wilderness. The sun was already starting to sink, the temperature dropping with it, and she had maybe 3 hours of daylight left. Smart would have been turning around, going back to the cabin, barring the door, and spending the next 30 days figuring out how to fight Victor Hale through legal channels. But Eliza had spent 2 years being smart, being careful, being alone. And where had it gotten her? 30 days from losing everything anyway. At least this way, she was doing something. The road west was barely a road at all, more like a suggestion worn into the landscape by wagons and horses over the years. Snow covered most of it, and Eliza had to pick her way carefully to avoid the deeper drifts. Her boots were good, but they weren't made for this kind of distance. By the time the sun touched the horizon, her feet were screaming, and her shoulders ached from the rifle. She made camp in a stand of pines, using deadfall to build a small fire. The temperature was brutal once the sun went down, the kind of cold that made your lungs hurt. She ate jerky and hardtack, rationing carefully, and tried not to think about how stupid this was. Tried not to think about the fact that even if she found Caleb and Eli, she had no idea what she'd say to them. Hey, remember me? The woman whose cabin you stayed in for 5 days? Well, funny story. Turns out you're railroad royalty. There's a warrant for your arrest, and a very dangerous man is hunting you because you're worth a fortune. Also, he's taking my land because I wouldn't tell him where you went. So, how have you been? Yeah. That would go over well. Eliza fed the fire and pulled her father's coat tighter around her shoulders. She'd brought his old bedroll too, the one that smelled like tobacco and pine sap and memories. It wasn't enough to keep her warm, but it was something. She must have dozed off because she woke to the sound of voices. Her hand went to the rifle before her eyes were fully open. The fire had burned down to embers, barely giving off light. The voices were distant but getting closer, male, rough, multiple speakers. Eliza's heart hammered. She killed what was left of the fire, scattering the embers and covering them with snow. Then she grabbed her pack and moved deeper into the trees, putting distance between herself and the campsite. Through the darkness, she could see lights now. Torches, maybe 3 or 4 of them, moving along the road. Riders. Eliza crouched behind a fallen log, the rifle across her knees. The riders came into view, 4 men on horseback, moving slowly, scanning the area. Even in the dim light, she recognized one of them, Garrett, Victor's deputy. She came this way, one of the other men said. Innkeeper said she bought supplies for a long trip. Could have gone anywhere, another voice argued. Could have doubled back. Hale doesn't think so. That was Garrett. He thinks she's going after Harrison, which means she knows where he is, or she's guessing. Either way, we follow her. She leads us to Harrison. We get what we came for. They were close enough now that Eliza could see their faces in the torchlight. Hard men, the kind who got paid to do things the law wouldn't touch, the kind who wouldn't hesitate to hurt her if they caught her. She held her breath, pressed against the log, willing herself invisible. The riders passed within 20 feet of her hiding spot. They didn't stop, didn't even slow down, just kept moving west, their torches disappearing into the darkness. Eliza waited until she couldn't hear them anymore, until the silence was complete. Then she waited another 10 minutes to be sure. Her hands were shaking when she finally stood. They were following her, which meant she couldn't go back, couldn't stop, couldn't make camp anywhere visible from the road, which also meant she couldn't use the road. Eliza looked at the forest, dark, dense, treacherous in daylight, and deadly at night. Going off trail in these conditions was asking to get lost, to freeze, to die. But staying on the trail meant leading Garrett straight to Caleb. She made her decision. She went into the forest. The next 2 days were the hardest of Eliza's life. Without the road to guide her, she had to navigate by landmarks, ridgelines, rock formations, the distant peaks she could see when the trees thinned out. She had her father's old compass, but it was unreliable at best, the needle spinning wildly in the cold. She walked until exhaustion forced her to stop, slept in short, freezing bursts, and kept moving. The forest was brutal. Deadfall hidden under snow sent her sprawling. Ice-covered streams had to be crossed carefully or not at all. Twice she heard wolves howling in the distance. Once she found tracks, something big, probably a bear that should have been hibernating but wasn't. She saw no sign of Garrett and his men. No sign of anyone. On the third day she stumbled onto a trail. Not the main road, but a smaller path, the kind trappers used. It ran roughly west, which was the right direction. Eliza followed it, every muscle screaming, her feet blistered inside her boots. By afternoon she smelled smoke. She followed the scent until she saw it, a thin column rising above the trees. Eliza approached carefully, the rifle ready, until she could see the source. A cabin, small, rough, barely more than a shack. But there was smoke coming from the chimney and a horse tied outside. Eliza's first instinct was to keep moving. The last thing she needed was to run into more trouble. But she was out of food, out of energy, and she needed information. Needed to know if she was even heading the right direction. She walked up to the cabin and knocked. The door opened immediately, and Eliza found herself looking down the barrel of a shotgun. "Turn around and leave," a woman's voice said from behind the gun. "Nothing for you here?" Eliza raised her hand slowly. "I'm not looking for trouble. Just information." "Information's trouble." "I'm looking for 2 people, a man and a boy. They would have come through here maybe a week ago." The shotgun didn't lower. "Don't know what you're talking about." "Please, it's important. Everything's important. Doesn't mean I have to help." Eliza lowered her hands slowly, keeping them visible. "My name's Eliza Rowan. I live up on Iron Ridge. The man I'm looking for, his name's Caleb Harrison. He stayed at my cabin during the storm. Now there are people hunting him, and I need to warn him." The woman behind the shotgun was silent for a long moment. Then she lowered it slightly. "Why should I believe you?" "Because if I was working with the men hunting him, I wouldn't be half frozen and alone. I'd have horses and supplies and backup." Another pause. Then the woman stepped aside. "Get in, quick." Eliza didn't argue. Inside, the cabin was warm and surprisingly well kept. A fire burned in the hearth, and there was a pot of something that smelled incredible simmering on the stove. The woman was maybe 50, weathered and sharp-eyed, with gray hair pulled back in a braid. "Sit," she said, gesturing to a chair. "You look like death." Eliza sat before her legs gave out. The warmth of the cabin was almost painful after days in the cold. The woman poured something from the pot into a bowl and handed it to her. "Stew. Eat." Eliza ate. It was rabbit and vegetables, and the best thing she'd ever tasted. She didn't realize how hungry she was until the bowl was empty. "More?" "Please." The woman refilled the bowl, then sat down across from her. "Name's Sarah. I'm a trapper. Been working this territory for 20 years. Thank you for letting me in. Didn't have much choice. You were about to collapse on my doorstep." Sarah studied her. "So, Caleb Harrison, yeah, I know him. He came through here about 5 days ago, him and the boy." Eliza's heart leapt. "Are they okay?" They were when they left. The boy was in rough shape, but Harrison was taking care of him. They stayed one night, then moved on. "Did he say where he was going?" Sarah hesitated. "Why do you want to know?" "Because the man hunting him is named Victor Hale. He's a railroad broker, and he wants Caleb for his money. He's got men on the road, and they're following me, hoping I'll lead them to him." "Then you led them right here." "No, I went off trail. They're on the main road, miles from here. Sarah didn't look convinced. And what do you plan to do if you find Harrison? Warn him. Help him, if I can. Why? You barely know him. It was the same question the sheriff had asked. The same question Eliza had been asking herself. Because it's the right thing to do, she said finally. And because I'm tired of doing nothing. Sarah was quiet for a long time. Then she stood and went to a shelf, pulling down a folded map. She spread it on the table. Harrison was heading for Broken Creek, she said, pointing to a spot on the map. It's a settlement about 40 miles west of here. Rough place, mostly miners and drifters, but it's off the main routes. Good place to disappear. How do I get there? You don't. Not in your condition. Sarah looked her over. You're exhausted, your feet are probably destroyed, and you're running on nothing but stubbornness. You go out there now, you'll die before you make it 10 miles. I don't have a choice. Everyone has a choice. That's the second time someone said that to me this week, and it's still not true. Sarah smiled slightly. Stubborn. I like that. She folded the map and handed it to Eliza. You rest here tonight. I'll give you supplies, patch up your feet, and in the morning I'll loan you a horse. But you have to promise me something. What? When you find Harrison, you tell him Sarah McCormick says he's an idiot for running, and that if he ever needs a place to hide, he's welcome here. Eliza blinked. You know him that well? I knew his wife. Before she married him, before he became railroad royalty. She was a good woman, deserved better than dying young. Sarah's expression softened. Harrison's a good man too, even if he's running from everything. He saved that boy when no one else would. That counts for something. It counts for a lot. Yeah, it does. Sarah was as good as her word. That night, Eliza slept in a real bed for the first time in a week. Sarah treated her blistered feet, gave her clean socks and better boots, and packed supplies that would last a week if she was careful. In the morning, she brought out a horse, a sturdy mare named Dusty, who looked as stubborn as Eliza felt. She's not fast, but she's reliable, Sarah said, and she knows these mountains better than most people. Trust her instincts. Eliza swung into the saddle, her body protesting every movement. How do I repay you for this? Find Harrison. Keep him alive. That's payment enough. And if I can't, then at least you tried. Eliza rode west, the map tucked in her coat, Sarah's words echoing in her head. The horse was everything Sarah had promised, steady, sure-footed, patient with Eliza's inexperienced handling. By midday, they'd covered more ground than Eliza had managed in 2 days on foot. The landscape changed as they went. The dense forest gave way to more open terrain, rocky and sparse. The wind picked up, carrying the smell of snow. Another storm was coming. Eliza pushed harder. By late afternoon, she saw it. A collection of rough buildings clustered in a valley, smoke rising from a dozen chimneys. Broken Creek. It looked exactly like its name. Rough, broken, barely holding together. But it was shelter. And somewhere in that mess of buildings, Caleb and Eli might be hiding. Eliza rode in slowly, watching. The town was bigger than she'd expected, maybe 100 people. Most of them looked like they'd rather be anywhere else. She passed a saloon, a general store, a building that might have been a hotel. At the far end of town, she found a stable. An old man was mucking out stalls when she dismounted. He looked up, squinting. Help you? Need to board my horse, just for the night. $2. Eliza handed over the money, watching his face. You see many travelers come through here? Some. Why? Looking for someone, a man and a boy. They would have come through maybe 5, 6 days ago. The old man's expression closed off. Don't know anything about that. He was lying, badly. It's important, Eliza pressed. The man's in trouble. I need to warn him. Lady, everyone in this town's in trouble. That's why they're here. You want to find someone? You do it yourself. I don't ask questions and I don't answer them. He turned back to his work, making it clear the conversation was over. Eliza led Dusty into a stall, unsaddled her, and made sure she had water and feed. Then she headed back out into the street. The sun was setting, shadows stretching long across the muddy road. Eliza pulled her coat tighter and started walking, looking for, what? A sign? A clue? She didn't even know what Caleb would be using for a name here. She was passing the saloon when she heard it, a child's laughter. Eliza stopped, her heart jumping. It was coming from an alley beside the saloon, narrow and dark. She moved toward it, hand on the rifle. In the alley, two boys were playing, some kind of game with stones and a stick. One of them was Eli. Eliza's breath caught. He looked better than the last time she'd seen him. Still too thin, but his color was good, his movements quick. He was laughing at something the other boy said, his face open in a way it hadn't been at her cabin. Eliza stepped forward. Eli. Both boys spun around. The other one ran immediately, disappearing deeper into the alley. Eli froze, his eyes going wide. Miss Rowan? Hey. For a moment, neither of them moved. Then Eli ran toward her, and Eliza barely had time to kneel before he crashed into her, his arms wrapping around her neck. You came, he said, his voice muffled against her shoulder. I thought I'd never see you again. Eliza's throat tightened. She hugged him back, feeling how fragile he still was under the too big coat. I had to. Where's Caleb? Eli pulled back, his expression shifting to worry. At the boarding house. But Miss Rowan, you shouldn't be here. It's not safe. I know, that's why I came. Eli, there are men looking for you, for Caleb, dangerous men. We know, that's why we're leaving tomorrow. Where? I don't know. Caleb doesn't tell me. He says it's safer that way. Smart. But it also meant Eliza was running out of time. Take me to him, she said. Please. Eli hesitated, then nodded. Okay. But he's not going to be happy you're here. That turned out to be an understatement. The boarding house was a sagging two-story building that looked like it might collapse in a strong wind. Eli led Eliza up a narrow staircase to the second floor, then stopped at a door near the end of the hall. He knocked. Caleb, it's me. Come in. Eli opened the door, then stepped aside. Eliza walked in. The room was small and sparse, a bed, a chair, a wash basin. Caleb was standing by the window looking out at the street. He turned when the door opened, and when he saw Eliza, he went absolutely still. What are you doing here? His voice was flat, controlled, but Eliza could hear the edge underneath. I came to warn you. About what? Victor Hale. He came to my cabin looking for you. He knows who you are, Caleb. He knows about Eli, about the warrant, and he's hunting you because of your railroad shares. Caleb's jaw tightened. How did you? I went to Coldwater, talked to the sheriff. Then Hale's men grabbed me and took me to him. He offered me money to tell him where you were. Eliza met his eyes. I didn't. But he knows I'm connected to you now, and he's taking my land because of it. Something flickered across Caleb's face. Surprise. Maybe guilt. Your land? Eminent domain, railroads coming through, and my property's in the way. I've got 30 days to vacate. Caleb looked away, his hand gripping the window frame. I'm sorry, I didn't come here for an apology. I came here because Hale's got men on the road. They were following me, which means they might be close. You need to leave. Now. We're leaving in the morning. That might not be soon enough. Caleb was quiet for a long moment. Then he looked at Eli. Can you go downstairs? Wait in the common room. I need to talk to Miss Rowan alone. Eli glanced between them, then nodded. Okay. The door closed behind him. The silence stretched. You shouldn't have come, Caleb said finally. Someone had to warn you. You could have sent word. Could have told the sheriff or someone heading west. You didn't have to risk your life walking 100 miles in winter. It's my choice. It's a stupid choice. Eliza's temper flared. Maybe, but it's mine to make, just like taking Eli was yours. Caleb flinched. That's different. How? You saw someone who needed help and you helped them. I did the same thing. The same. Helping me is going to cost you everything. Your land, your home, maybe your life if Hale decides you're a liability. I know. Then why? It was the question Eliza had been avoiding, the one she didn't have a good answer for, because the truth was complicated and messy and didn't fit into neat explanations. Because for 2 years I convinced myself that being alone was enough, she said quietly. That survival was the same as living, and then you showed up and for 5 days I wasn't alone. For 5 days I remembered what it felt like to matter to someone. And when you left, that silence came back, and I couldn't... She stopped, swallowed. I couldn't go back to it. Not after knowing something different. Caleb stared at her. Eliza, I'm not asking you for anything, she interrupted. I'm not asking you to stay or to come back, or to fix this. I just needed you to know what's coming, so you can protect Eli. That's all." The room was so quiet, Eliza could hear her own heartbeat. Then Caleb moved. He crossed the room in 3 steps and pulled her into his arms. Eliza froze, too surprised to react. Caleb held her tight, his face buried in her hair, and she could feel him shaking. "I'm sorry," he said, his voice rough. "I'm sorry for bringing this down on you. I'm sorry I didn't tell you the truth. I'm sorry for all of it." Eliza's arms came up slowly, wrapping around him. He was warm and solid and real, and for a moment she let herself just hold on. "It's not your fault," she said. "It is. All of it is." He pulled back just enough to look at her, his hands on her shoulders. "I should have kept moving, should have found another cabin, another shelter. But I saw your light, and He stopped. "I needed to believe there was still kindness in the world, that someone would open the door instead of closing it, and you did. And now you're paying for it." "I do it again." "I know. That's what scares me." They stood there, close enough that Eliza could see the gold flecks in his dark eyes, could feel the warmth of his breath. "What are you going to do?" she asked. "Keep running, get Eli somewhere safe, somewhere Hale can't reach. And then?" "I don't know. I've been running for 3 years. I don't know how to do anything else anymore." "You could fight." Caleb's laugh was bitter. "Fight Victor Hale? With what? I don't have money. I don't have power. I don't even have my name anymore. I gave all of that up. You have the truth. You have witnesses. You have proof that Eli was being abused in that mine. And Hale has lawyers and judges and the law on his side. He'll twist everything until I'm the criminal and he's the victim. That's how men like him win." Eliza wanted to argue, to insist there was another way, but she'd seen how Hale operated. She knew Caleb was probably right. "What about your shares?" she asked. "The ones Hale wants, could you use those? Leverage them somehow?" Caleb was quiet. "Maybe. If I could prove I still have legal claim to them, but that would mean revealing who I am. Going back to being Caleb Harrison, and I can't—" His voice cracked. "I can't go back to that life, to that name. Everything it represents, everyone I lost." "You don't have to be who you were," Eliza said. "You can be who you are now. Someone who saved a boy. Someone who fixes fences and chops wood and does what's right even when it's hard. Someone who destroys the lives of people who help him. Someone who's worth helping." Caleb looked at her like she'd said something impossible, like she'd offered him something he'd forgotten existed. Before either of them could speak, footsteps pounded up the stairs. The door burst open. Eli stood there, breathing hard, his face white. "They're here. The men. I saw them down at the saloon showing your picture around." Caleb's expression went cold. "How many?" "4. Maybe 5. "Did they see you?" I don't think so. I ran as soon as I heard your name." Caleb moved immediately, grabbing his pack, checking the small revolver he had tucked in his belt. "We leave now. Out the back." "There is no back," Eli said. "This building only has one exit." Caleb cursed. He moved to the window, looking out. "Fire escape?" "No." "Then we go down, fast, before they get upstairs." Eliza grabbed the rifle. "I'll go first. If they stop us, I'll say I'm traveling alone, that I don't know you." "They'll recognize you." "Maybe, but they won't expect me to fight back." Caleb looked like he wanted to argue, but there wasn't time. They moved quickly, Eliza in front, Caleb and Eli behind. Down the narrow staircase, through the common room where a few rough-looking men sat drinking and didn't bother to look up. They were almost to the door when it opened. Garrett stepped inside. His eyes went straight to Eliza, then to Caleb. Then he smiled. "Well," he said, "this just got a lot easier." Eliza's hand tightened on the rifle, but Garrett already had his gun drawn, pointing it casually at Caleb's chest. "Don't!" Garrett said. "Any of you." Behind him, 2 more men filed into the boarding house, blocking the exit. Eliza recognized one from the road that first night, thick-shouldered, mean-looking. The third was younger, nervous, his hand shaking slightly on his pistol. The men drinking in the common room barely glanced over. This wasn't the kind of town where people got involved in other people's problems. "Mr. Harrison," Garrett said, his voice pleasant, "or should I say Mr. Vance? Mr. Hale's been looking for you." Caleb's face was stone. I don't know what you're talking about. Come on now, we both know that's not true. Garrett's eyes flicked to Eli, who'd pressed himself against Caleb's side. And that must be the boy, the one you took from Blackstone Mine. There's a warrant for that, you know. The boy was being worked to death. That's not how the law sees it. The law sees kidnapping, theft of property. He's not property. He's a child. Semantics. Garrett shrugged. Either way, you're coming with us. You and the boy both. Miss Rowan, he turned to Eliza. You're free to go. Mr. Hale doesn't have any quarrel with you, long as you don't interfere. Eliza raised the rifle. I'm interfering, Garrett sighed. Don't be stupid. You pull that trigger, my men pull theirs, and everyone in this room ends up dead, including the boy. Then I guess we all better stay calm. For a long moment, nobody moved. The tension in the room was thick enough to choke on. Eliza could feel sweat running down her back despite the cold, could see Eli trembling, could see the calculation in Caleb's eyes as he measured the distance, the odds, the chances. Then Caleb spoke, his voice quiet. Let them go. The woman and the boy. You want me? Fine. But they're not part of this. That's not my call to make. Then make it Hale's call. Tell him I'll cooperate. I'll sign whatever he wants, do whatever he needs, but only if they walk out of here safe. Garrett considered this. How do I know you won't run the second they're clear? Because I give you my word. The word of a man who's been living under a false name for 3 years? Caleb's jaw tightened. The word of a man who has nothing left to lose except them. Something in his voice must have convinced Garrett because the deputy lowered his gun slightly. I'll ask, but you don't move until I get an answer. He nodded to the younger man. Watch them. They twitch wrong. Shoot the woman first. He stepped outside. Through the dirty window, Eliza could see him walking toward the saloon, where more of Hale's men were probably waiting. The room stayed frozen. The nervous young man kept his gun on Eliza, but his hands were shaking so badly she wasn't sure if that made him more or less dangerous. The thick-shouldered one watched Caleb like a hawk watching a rabbit. You can't do this, Eliza said quietly to Caleb. You sign those shares over. You give him everything. I don't care about the shares. I never did. But I care about you and Eli. That's it. Caleb looked at her, and his expression was raw. I've spent 3 years running from everything I lost. I'm not losing anything else. We could fight our way out. And get Eli killed? No. Eli pulled at Caleb's coat. I don't want to go back to the mine. You're not going back, I promise. But if they arrest you, they won't. I'll make sure of it. The boy looked like he wanted to argue, but the fear in his eyes was too strong. Eliza's heart broke watching him. Garrett came back 5 minutes later. Hale agrees the woman and boy go free. But Harrison, you come now. No games, no tricks. We take you to Coldwater. You sign the papers, and then... He paused. Then Hale says you're free to go. No charges, no pursuit. I want that in writing. You'll get it when we get to Coldwater. Not good enough. I want it now. Garrett's expression hardened. You're not in a position to negotiate. Then we've got a problem. They stared at each other. Eliza could see the calculation happening behind Garrett's eyes, weighing whether it was worth the fight, worth the risk, worth whatever Hale was paying him. Finally, Garrett pulled a piece of paper from his coat and a pencil. He scribbled something quickly, then handed it to Caleb. There. Hale's word in writing. You cooperate, you walk free. Happy? Caleb read it, his face unreadable. Then he folded it and tucked it inside his coat. Fine. Let them go first. Once they're on a horse and out of town, I'll come peacefully. How do I know you won't run? You have my word, and unlike some people, I keep it. Garrett didn't like it, but he nodded. Fine. Miss Rowan, the boy, get your things and get out. You've got 10 minutes to be gone. Eliza wanted to argue, wanted to fight, wanted to do anything except leave Caleb to face this alone. But Eli was tugging at her hand, and she could see in Caleb's eyes that this was the only play he had left. Caleb, go. Please. She wanted to say something, wanted to tell him what? That she'd come back for him? That she wouldn't let Hale win? That these last few weeks had meant something? But there were too many guns and too little time. Come on, she said to Eli, her voice rough. They walked to the door. Garrett stepped aside, letting them pass. Outside, the street was dark except for the light spilling from the saloon. Eliza could see shapes moving in the window, more of Hale's men, probably. She led Eli toward the stable, walking fast but not running. Her mind was spinning, trying to figure out what to do, how to fix this, how to... Miss Rowan? She looked down. Eli was crying, silent tears streaming down his face. He's not coming back, is he? Eliza wanted to lie, wanted to promise everything would be fine, but she'd never lied to this boy, and she wasn't going to start now. I don't know, she said, but we're not giving up on him. Okay? Eli nodded, wiping his eyes. At the stable, the old man was still there, smoking a pipe. He looked up when they entered. Need your horse? He asked. Yes, and another one if you've got it. The boy needs to ride. The old man studied Eli, then Eliza. You in trouble? Always. He almost smiled. Figures. He disappeared into the back and returned with a smaller horse, a gelding that looked steady enough. This one's gentle. Boy can handle him. How much? Consider it a loan. You bring him back when you're done. We're square. Eliza wanted to hug him. Instead, she just nodded. Thank you. They saddled up quickly. Eliza lifted Eli onto the gelding, made sure he had a good grip on the reins, then swung onto Dusty. Where are we going? Eli asked. Out of town. Then we figure out our next move. They rode out slowly, Eliza watching the boarding house the whole time. She could see shapes moving inside, could imagine Garrett and his men surrounding Caleb, taking his gun, making sure he couldn't fight back. She wanted to turn around, wanted to charge back in there with the rifle and what? Get them all killed? No, she needed to be smart about this. They were at the edge of town when Eli spoke again. We're going back for him, right? Yes. How? I don't know yet, but we will. She hoped that was true. They rode for an hour, putting distance between themselves and Broken Creek, until Eliza found a spot off the trail where they could rest without being seen. A small clearing surrounded by rocks, sheltered from the wind. Eliza built a small fire, just enough for warmth, and they sat close to it. Eli hadn't said much since they left, and his silence was worse than tears. Tell me about the mine, Eliza said finally. About what happened there. Eli looked up, surprised. Why? Because if we're going to fight Hale, I need to know everything. The boy was quiet for a long moment. Then he started talking. His parents had been miners, he said. Good people, but poor. They'd worked the Blackstone mine for years, barely making enough to survive. When they both got sick, some kind of lung disease from the dust, there was no money for doctors, no help from the company. They died within days of each other. Eli was 8 years old. The mine owner, a man named Craddock, told Eli he could stay if he worked. 12 hours a day in the tunnels, hauling ore, for just enough food to keep him alive. No pay, no way out. It was dark down there, Eli said quietly. All the time, and cold, and the air was bad. Made you cough, made your chest hurt. How long were you there? 4 months, maybe 5. I lost track. And then Caleb came. Eli nodded. He was passing through, saw me coming out of the mine one day. I was coughing so hard I couldn't breathe, and he... The boy's voice cracked. He asked if I was okay. Nobody had asked me that in so long, and I said no. And he said, do you want to leave? And I said yes. Just like that? Just like that. He went to Craddock, tried to buy my contract, but Craddock said no. Said I owed too much for my parents' debts. So Caleb waited until nighttime, and he came to the barracks where they kept us, and he took me. We just walked out. Eliza's throat was tight. And you've been running ever since. Yeah, but Caleb kept saying it would be okay, that we'd find somewhere safe, somewhere I could be a kid again. Eli looked at her. Do you think that's still possible? Yes, even if they arrest him? Even then. Eli was quiet. Then, I heard him, in your cabin, talking about his family, his wife and daughter. He told you about them? No, I heard him one night when he thought I was asleep. He was crying. The boy's voice was small. I think he sees them when he looks at me. I think that's why he saved me. Because he couldn't save them. Eliza's heart broke. Maybe, but that doesn't make it less real. He cares about you, Eli. Not because of who you remind him of, Because of who you are. How do you know? Because I've seen the way he looks at you, the way he protects you. That's not about the past. That's about now. Eli was crying again, but this time he didn't try to hide it. Eliza pulled him close, letting him sob into her coat. When he finally quieted, she said, "Get some rest. We've got a long ride tomorrow." "Where are we going?" "Coldwater. That's where they're taking Caleb, and that's where we're going to get him back." Eli looked up at her. "How?" "I'm working on it." They slept fitfully, waking with the dawn. Eliza's body ached from days of riding and not enough food, but she pushed through it. They rode hard, following the main road this time. There was no point hiding now. By late afternoon, they reached Coldwater. The town looked the same as when Eliza had left it, gray, tired, clinging to the edge of survival. But something felt different. There was tension in the air, people moving quickly, clusters of men talking in low voices. Eliza tied the horses outside the sheriff's office and walked in with Eli. Sheriff Briggs looked up from his desk, and his expression went from surprise to concern. "Eliza, what are you doing back here?" "They took him. Hail his men. They're bringing him to Coldwater to sign over his shares." "I heard. Garrett came through an hour ago with his men and a prisoner. Took him straight to the hotel." Briggs stood. "I tried to intervene, but Hale's got papers. Legal papers. Says Harrison's cooperating voluntarily." "He's not. He only agreed because Hale threatened the boy." Briggs looked at Eli, who was standing close to Eliza, his eyes wide. "That true, son?" Eli nodded. "Doesn't matter," Briggs said heavily. "If Harrison signs those papers, it's done. Legal and binding. And from what I hear, the signing's happening tonight." "Then we stop it." "How? I've got no jurisdiction here. Hale's got lawyers, documents, everything he needs. Unless Harrison refuses to sign, he won't refuse. He made a deal. They let us go. He cooperates." "Then it's over." "No." Eliza's voice was hard. "It's not over until I say it's over." Briggs studied her. "What are you planning?" "I don't know yet, but I need your help. Or at least your silence." "Eliza, please. These people came to me for help. I'm not abandoning them now." The sheriff was quiet for a long moment. Then he sighed. "What do you need?" "Information. Where's the signing happening?" "The hotel. Top floor, Hale's private room. He's got guards posted." "How many?" "4, maybe 5. "Can you get me inside?" "Not a chance. Hale's locked it down tight. Nobody gets in without his permission." Eliza thought fast. "What about the back? Is there another entrance?" "Service entrance in the alley, but it'll be guarded too." "What if there was a distraction, something to pull the guards away?" Briggs looked at her like she was crazy. "You want to start a fight in the middle of town?" "If that's what it takes." "Eliza, you could get killed, and even if you somehow get to Harrison, then what? You can't just walk out of there. Hale will have you arrested." "For what?" "Interfering with a legal proceeding. Assault. Take your pick." "Let him try." Briggs shook his head. "You're as stubborn as your father." "I'll take that as a compliment." The sheriff was quiet. Then he pulled open a drawer in his desk and took out a ring of keys. "The service entrance lock is old. This key," he held up a small brass one, "opens most of the old locks in this town. Might work on that one too." Eliza took the key. "Thank you." "Don't thank me. I'm probably making a huge mistake." He looked at Eli. "Boy, you stay here with me. It's safer." "No." Eli's voice was small but firm. "I'm going with Miss Rowan." "Son, Caleb saved me because nobody else would. I'm not sitting here while Miss Rowan tries to save him." Eliza knelt down so she was eye level with Eli. "This could be dangerous, really dangerous. I need you to understand that." "I understand. I'm still going." She saw her own stubbornness reflected in his eyes. "Okay, but you stay behind me. You do exactly what I say. Deal?" "Deal." Briggs looked like he wanted to argue, but he just sighed. "If you're doing this, do it soon. The signing's set for 7 o'clock. That's less than 2 hours." Eliza checked the rifle, made sure it was loaded. Then she looked at Eli. "Ready?" "Ready." They left the sheriff's office as the sun was setting, painting the street in shades of orange and red. Eliza led Eli around the back of the building, staying in the shadows. The hotel loomed ahead, its windows lit. The service entrance was in a narrow alley, exactly where Briggs had said. And there was a guard, one of Hale's men, leaning against the wall, looking bored. Eliza pulled Eli back around the corner. Okay, I need you to go back to the main street, find the saloon, go inside, and tell them there's a fight breaking out behind the general store. Make it sound urgent. Can you do that? What if they don't believe me? They will. You're a scared kid. They'll believe you. Eli nodded and ran off. Eliza waited, counting in her head. 30 seconds. A minute. Then she heard it, shouting from the main street. The guard at the service entrance straightened, looking toward the sound. More shouting, the crash of breaking glass. The guard hesitated, then jogged toward the commotion. Eliza didn't waste time. She ran to the door, tried the key Briggs had given her. It stuck at first, then turned with a click. She was in. Inside, the service area was dim and smelled like old food and soap. Eliza moved quickly, rifle ready, heading for the stairs. She could hear voices above, muffled, indistinct. She climbed carefully, testing each step before putting her weight on it. The stairs creaked anyway, but not loud enough to give her away. The top floor was carpeted, quieter. Eliza moved down the hall, listening. At the end, light spilled from under a door. She could hear voices now, clearer. Victor Hale. Just need your signature here and here, then we're done. Caleb. And you'll leave the boy alone, leave Eliza alone? I gave you my word. Your word isn't worth much. Perhaps, but it's all you have. Eliza reached the door. It was slightly ajar. She could see into the room, Victor at a desk, papers spread in front of him. Caleb sitting across from him, his hands free but two guards standing behind him. Garrett was there too, leaning against the wall. Eliza took a breath. Then she kicked the door open and stepped inside, rifle raised. Don't sign anything. Every head turned. Victor's expression went from surprise to annoyance. Miss Rowan, you're becoming quite the nuisance. I've been called worse. Guards. The two men behind Caleb moved, but Eliza swung the rifle toward them. Don't. I will shoot, and at this range I won't miss. They froze. Victor sighed. This is pointless. You're outnumbered and outgunned. Even if you shoot one of us, the others will kill you. Maybe. But I'll make sure you're the first one I hit. How melodramatic. Victor leaned back in his chair, unbothered. Let me ask you something, Miss Rowan. What exactly do you think you're accomplishing here? Stopping you from stealing what isn't yours. Stealing? I'm conducting a legal business transaction. Harrison agrees to sign over his shares, and in return, he gets his freedom. Everyone wins. Except he doesn't want to sign. He's only doing it because you threaten people he cares about. I didn't threaten anyone. I simply made him an offer. An offer he can't refuse. That's coercion. Victor's smile was thin. The law sees it differently. Then the law's wrong. Perhaps, but it's still the law. Caleb stood slowly, his eyes on Eliza. You shouldn't be here. Neither should you. I made a deal. A deal with a liar. You think he's really going to let you walk away? The moment you sign those papers, you're a liability. He'll find a reason to keep you locked up, or worse. Victor's expression didn't change, but something flickered in his eyes. Eliza knew she'd hit close to the truth. That's quite an accusation, Victor said. Prove me wrong. Let him go right now, no papers, no signatures. If you're really a man of your word, you don't need his cooperation. I'm a businessman, Miss Rowan. I don't work for free. Then you're a thief. Careful, slander is a crime. So is kidnapping. So is working children to death. So is using the law to steal land from people who can't fight back. Eliza's voice rose. You want to talk about crimes, Hale? Let's start with all of yours. The room was silent. Garrett had straightened, his hand moving toward his gun. The guards looked nervous. Caleb was watching Eliza like he couldn't quite believe she was real. Victor's smile faded. You're making a very serious mistake. I've made plenty of those. One more won't hurt. You're going to lose everything. Your land, your reputation, possibly your life. For what? For a man you barely know? For what's right. Victor laughed, a harsh, bitter sound. Right. You still believe in that? In this world? He shook his head. You're more naive than I thought. And you're exactly as heartless as I thought. Victor's expression went cold. Garrett, remove her. Garrett moved, but Caleb was faster. He stepped between Garrett and Eliza, his hands up. Wait. Everyone froze. Caleb turned to Victor. I'll sign, right now. No more games. But you let her walk out of here. You leave her land alone. You drop the eminent domain claim. That's the deal. Caleb, no, Eliza started. That's the deal, Caleb repeated, his voice hard. Take it or leave it. Victor studied him. And if I agree, you'll sign? No tricks? No tricks. What about the boy? He stays with Eliza. You never touch him again. Victor considered this. Then he nodded. Deal. But she leaves now. And if either of you causes any more problems, all bets are off. Caleb looked at Eliza. Go. I'm not leaving you. Yes, you are, please. His eyes were pleading. Trust me. Just this once. Eliza wanted to argue, wanted to fight, wanted to drag him out of there by force if necessary. But she saw something in his face, not surrender, but something else. Something like a plan. Okay, she said quietly, but this isn't over. I know. She backed toward the door, the rifle still raised, her eyes on Garrett and the guards. Nobody moved. When she reached the hallway, she turned and ran. Down the stairs, through the service entrance, into the alley. Eli was waiting there, his eyes wide. Did it work? I don't know. Come on. They ran back to the sheriff's office. Briggs was there, pacing. Well, he's signing. He made a deal. His shares for my land and Eli's safety. Briggs swore. Then it's done. No, not yet. Eliza's mind was racing. Those papers he's signing, they need to be witnessed, right? Filed with the land office? Yes. Why? Because until they're filed, they're not legal. And if something happened to them before they could be filed, Eliza, no. You can't. I can't what? I can't fight for what's mine? I can't protect a boy who's already lost everything? I can't save a good man from a bad one? She was breathing hard. My whole life I've been told what I can't do. I'm done listening. Briggs stared at her. Then slowly he smiled. You really are your father's daughter. Is that a yes? That's a I didn't see anything, which is the best you're getting from me. Eliza almost hugged him. Instead, she grabbed Eli's hand. Come on, we've got work to do. They left the office and headed back toward the hotel. The street was darker now, most of the businesses closed, but lights still burned in the hotel windows. Eliza found a spot across the street where they could watch without being seen. They waited. An hour passed, then another. Finally, the hotel door opened. Victor Hale stepped out, followed by Garrett and the guards. Between them, Caleb walked with his head down, his hands bound. Eliza's blood went cold. He lied. Hale lied. What do we do? We follow them, see where they're taking him. They stayed in the shadows, trailing the group through the darkening streets. Victor led them to a building on the edge of town, the old mining company office, long abandoned. They went inside. Eliza crept closer, Eli behind her. Through a broken window, she could see them, Victor standing over Caleb, who was tied to a chair now, papers on the table in front of him. But Caleb wasn't signing. He was talking, his voice too low to hear. Then Victor hit him. Caleb's head snapped back, blood on his lip. Eliza raised the rifle, but Eli grabbed her arm. Wait, look. Victor was pulling out a different set of papers now. Not the shares. Something else. He was talking, gesturing, his face twisted with anger. And Caleb was smiling. Whatever he'd said, whatever he'd done, it had worked. Victor threw the papers on the ground and stormed out, Garrett and the guards following. They left Caleb tied to the chair, alone in the dark building. Eliza waited until they were gone. Then she and Eli ran inside. Caleb looked up, his eyes widening. What are you? Saving you. Again. Eliza cut the ropes binding his hands. What happened? Why didn't you sign? Caleb stood, rubbing his wrists. Because the papers he wanted me to sign weren't just for the shares. They included a confession, saying I kidnapped Eli, that I extorted money from the mine, that I threatened Hale's life. He was going to use it to have me arrested, permanently. But you figured it out. I read the fine print. He got sloppy. Caleb looked at her. You came back. Of course I did. Even after I told you to leave. especially after that. He pulled her into his arms, holding her tight. Thank you. Eliza held him back, feeling the warmth of him, the realness. We're not done yet. Hale's still out there, and he's not going to give up. I know, but I'm done running. Caleb pulled back, looking at her and Eli. I'm done letting men like him win. So what do we do? Caleb's expression was hard. We fight back. Fighting back sounded good in theory. In practice, it meant 3 exhausted people standing in an abandoned building with no plan, no resources, and a very powerful enemy who wanted them destroyed. Eliza looked at Caleb's bloodied face, at Eli's frightened eyes, and felt the weight of every decision that had led them here. Okay, so how exactly do we fight back against a man who owns half the territory and has the law in his pocket? Caleb moved to the window, checking the street. We use what he wants against him, the shares. He needs my signature to make them legally his. Without it, they're in limbo. His merger is incomplete. His investors are waiting. Every day I don't sign costs him money. So we wait him out? No. We make him come to us. On our terms. Caleb turned back to them. But first we need proof. Evidence that he's been operating outside the law. The fake confession he tried to make me sign, that's extortion. The threats against you, against Eli, that's coercion. If we can document it, take it to someone with authority. Everyone with authority is either working for him or scared of him, Eliza interrupted. Briggs can't touch him. The land office won't listen. Who exactly are we taking this to? Caleb was quiet for a moment. Then something shifted in his expression. The territorial governor. He's based in Helena. He and my father served together in the war. He owes our family. Your family that you walked away from? The family I walked away from still has a name, still has influence. If I go to him as Caleb Harrison, not as some drifter, he'll listen. And you're willing to do that? To go back to being that person? Caleb looked at Eli, then at Eliza. For you two? Yes. The conviction in his voice made Eliza's chest tight. She'd spent 2 years believing that caring about people only led to loss, that the smart thing was to stay isolated, stay safe, stay numb. But standing here, in this broken building with these 2 people who'd somehow become her whole world, she realized something. Safety wasn't living, it was just slower dying. Okay, she said. Helena it is. How far? 3 days hard riding, maybe 4. And how do we get there with Hale's men looking for us? Carefully. Eli spoke up for the first time. What about Miss Sarah, the trapper lady? She said Caleb was welcome to hide there if he needed. Eliza blinked. The boy was right. Sarah's cabin was off the main routes, hidden. And Sarah had resources, horses, supplies, knowledge of the back country. That could work, Caleb said slowly, if we can make it there without being followed. We can't use the main roads, Eliza said. Hale's men will be watching those. We go through the high country. It's harder, but it's hidden. In winter? Eliza, that's suicide. So is staying here. They stared at each other. Then Caleb nodded. You're right. We leave tonight. Before Hale realizes I'm gone. They moved fast. Back to the sheriff's office first, where Briggs looked unsurprised to see them. Figured you'd be back, he said. What do you need? Horses, supplies, and your word that you didn't see us. Briggs pulled out a map, marking a route through the mountains. This trail will get you past Hale's men. It's rough, but it's passable. Barely. He grabbed a saddlebag and started filling it with supplies from his own stores. Take this. And this. He handed Caleb a revolver. You might need it. I can't pay you back. Don't want you to. Just promise me you'll take that bastard down. I promise. Briggs turned to Eliza. Your father would be proud of you. You know that? Eliza's throat tightened. I hope so. I know so. He squeezed her shoulder. Now get out of here, and be careful. They left through the back, taking the horses Eliza and Eli had ridden in on, plus 1 more Briggs had somehow acquired. The night was cold and clear, stars scattered across the sky like thrown salt. They rode north first, away from the route to Sarah's cabin, laying a false trail. Then they doubled back, cutting into the high country where the snow was deep and the going was slow. It took them 2 days to reach Sarah's cabin. 2 days of brutal cold, of pushing through snow that sometimes came up to the horses' chests, of sleeping in shifts because none of them trusted the silence. Eli held up better than Eliza expected, the boy's resilience a quiet kind of strength. On the second night, as they huddled around a small fire, Eli asked the question that had been hanging between them. What happens if the governor won't help? Caleb was quiet for a long moment. Then we try something else. Like what? I don't know yet. Will we have to keep running forever? No. Caleb's voice was firm. One way or another, this ends. I'm not letting you live like this. I don't mind running, as long as we're together. Eliza watched Caleb pull the boy close, saw the way Eli melted into his arms like he belonged there. And she thought about families. Not the ones you were born into, but the ones you built from scraps and stubbornness and desperate hope. They reached Sarah's cabin at dawn on the third day. Sarah took one look at them and started barking orders. Inside, all of you. You look half dead. She fed them, tended to their frostbitten fingers and wind-burned faces, and listened to their story without interrupting. When they finished, she sat back in her chair. So you need to get to Helena without Hale knowing. Yes, and you need horses that can make the trip. If you can spare them. Sarah stood, moving to a trunk in the corner. She pulled out a bundle wrapped in oilcloth and tossed it to Caleb. That's $1,000. Payment for a debt your father never collected on. He saved my husband's life 20 years ago. This is me paying it back. Caleb stared at the money. Sarah, I can't. You can and you will. You'll need it in Helena. Bribes, lawyers, whatever it takes. She turned to Eliza. And you. Your father helped me through my first winter alone after my husband died. Taught me how to trap, how to survive. I owe him too. You don't owe us anything. That's not how debts work in this country. People help people. That's how we all survive. Sarah's expression softened. Now rest. You leave tomorrow at first light. I'll get the horses ready. They stayed one night, and for the first time in weeks, Eliza felt safe. Not because they were hidden, though they were, but because they weren't alone. Sarah's presence was solid, unshakable, a reminder that there were still good people in the world. That night, after Eli had fallen asleep, Eliza found Caleb outside staring at the stars. Can't sleep? She asked. Too much thinking. About what? About everything I gave up, everything I walked away from. He glanced at her. I thought leaving that life behind would make me free, but it just made me empty. And now? Now I'm terrified. Because I have things to lose again. You, Eli, the chance at something better. He turned to face her fully. I can't lose this, Eliza. I can't lose you. Then don't. I'm serious. If something happens in Helena, if Hale gets to me before I can... Eliza put her hand over his mouth. Stop. Nothing's going to happen. We're going to Helena, we're going to expose Hale, and we're going to win, because the alternative isn't acceptable. Caleb pulled her hand away, but he held on to it. You make it sound simple. It is simple. Not easy, but simple. She stepped closer. We fight for what matters. And you matter. This matters. He kissed her then, and it was nothing like Eliza had imagined a first kiss would be. It wasn't gentle or romantic or perfect. It was desperate and real and tasted like fear and hope mixed together. When they pulled apart, Caleb rested his forehead against hers. I don't deserve you. Nobody deserves anybody. We just choose each other every day. That's all love is. Is that what this is? I think so. I'm not sure. I've never done this before. Eliza smiled slightly, but I'm willing to find out. Even if it's complicated? Especially if it's complicated. They stood there in the cold, holding each other, and Eliza thought about all the versions of herself she'd been. The girl who lost her father, the woman who survived alone, the person who opened her door in a storm. She liked this version best. They left for Helena at dawn, riding hard. Sarah's horses were strong and fresh, and they made good time. By the third day, they could see the city rising in the distance, bigger than Coldwater, bigger than anything Eliza had ever seen. Helena was chaos. Streets packed with wagons and people, buildings going up everywhere, the sound of hammers and saws and shouting. The territorial capital growing faster than it could handle. Caleb led them through the crowds to a large house on the edge of town. He dismounted, hesitated, then walked up and knocked. A servant answered, her eyes widening when she saw him. Mr. Harrison, is that... We thought you were... I need to see Governor Matthews. It's urgent. Of course. Please, come in. They were shown to a study lined with books and hunting trophies. A few minutes later, a large man with gray hair and a military bearing entered. Caleb Harrison. His voice was rough with emotion. I'll be damned. We thought you were dead. Close enough. Caleb shook his hand. Governor, I need your help. They talked for 2 hours. Caleb laid out everything. Hale's threats, the extortion, the attempted fraud, the abuse at the Blackstone mine. Eliza added her testimony about the land seizure. Eli spoke quietly about the conditions in the tunnels, about children dying in the dark. Governor Matthews listened to all of it, his expression growing darker. Victor Hale, he said finally. I've heard rumors about his methods, but nothing concrete. If what you're saying is true, it's true. And I can prove it. Caleb pulled out the papers Hale had tried to make him sign. This is a false confession. He was going to use it to have me arrested. That's extortion and fraud. Matthews studied the papers. This is good, but it's not enough. Hale has lawyers. He'll claim you signed it voluntarily, that you're fabricating charges to avoid prosecution. Then what do we need? More victims, more witnesses, a pattern of behavior that can't be explained away. Matthews looked at Eli. The mine is the key. If we can get testimony from other children, other workers, show that Hale knew about the conditions and allowed them to continue. He didn't just allow them, Eli said quietly. He owned part of the mine, Mr. Craddock told us. Said Hale was a silent partner. Matthew's eyes sharpened. Can you prove that? There were papers in Craddock's office. I saw them when I was cleaning one day. Papers can be destroyed. Not if we get there first. Caleb stood. The mine's 3 days from here. If we move fast... You can't go, Matthews interrupted. Hale's got a warrant for your arrest. The moment you show up anywhere official, he'll have you locked up. Then I'll go, Eliza said. I'm nobody. He's got no reason to arrest me. Eliza, no. It makes sense. I go to the mine, get the papers, bring them back. You stay here where it's safe. Caleb looked like he wanted to argue, but he couldn't. She was right. Matthews nodded slowly. I can give you a letter of authority. As an agent of the territorial government, you'll have the right to inspect the mine's records. Will that be enough? Against Hale's lawyers? Maybe, maybe not. But it's a start. Eliza rode out the next morning with Matthew's letter tucked in her coat and a knot of fear in her stomach. The mine was everything Eli had described and worse. Dark, cold, reeking of sulfur and despair. Men with dead eyes hauling ore. And children, dozens of them, some barely 6 years old, covered in coal dust and coughing. She found Craddock in his office, a fat man with greasy hair and calculating eyes. I'm here on behalf of the territorial governor, Eliza said, showing him the letter. I need access to your partnership records. Craddock's face went pale. I don't know what you're talking about. Your partnership with Victor Hale. The documents proving he owns part of this operation. That's private business information. Not anymore. Governor's orders. Eliza stepped forward. You can cooperate and maybe avoid prosecution, or you can refuse and definitely face charges for everything happening in those tunnels. Craddock sweated. Then he pulled out a locked box from his desk and opened it with shaking hands. Inside were contracts, agreements, letters, all proving Hale's involvement in the mine, his knowledge of the conditions, his profit from child labor. Eliza took everything. On her way out, she stopped at the entrance to the tunnels. Children were filing out for their brief midday break, blinking in the sudden light like creatures who'd forgotten what the sun looked like. One boy, maybe 7, looked up at her with hollow eyes. Are you here to help us? Eliza knelt down. Yes, I'm going to make this stop. People always say that, but nobody ever does. I will. I promise. She didn't know if he believed her, but she believed herself. She rode back to Helena with the documents, arriving 4 days later. Caleb met her at the governor's house, pulling her into his arms. You're alive. Barely. That mine, Caleb, those children. I know. We have to shut it down. We will. Matthews reviewed the documents that night, his expression grim. This is it. This is enough. I'll have arrest warrants issued for Hale and Craddock by morning, and I'll personally oversee the closure of that mine. What about my land? Eliza asked. The eminent domain claim? Dismissed. If Hale's under arrest, his company can't move forward with it. Relief washed over Eliza so strongly she had to sit down. Her land, her home, safe. But Matthews wasn't done. There's one more thing. Harrison, your shares, legally, they're still yours. But Hale's merger left the company in a complicated state. If you want to reclaim your position, I don't. Caleb's voice was firm. I don't want anything to do with that company, but I want to make sure it's run properly, ethically. No more mines like Blackstone. No more destroying people for profit. That's a tall order. Then find someone who can do it, someone I can trust. Because I'm done with that world. I'm building a different life now. Matthews studied him. With them? He nodded at Eliza and Eli. Yes. You're sure? I've never been more sure of anything. Matthews smiled. Your father would have been proud. He always said you had the strongest moral compass of anyone he knew. He just wished you'd stayed around to use it. I'm using it now. The arrest happened the next day. Eliza wasn't there to see it, but she heard about it. Hale being taken from his hotel in chains, screaming about lawyers and false charges. Craddock arrested at the mine. The children freed and taken to temporary shelters while the territory figured out how to help them. It wasn't perfect. Some of those children would carry the scars forever. Some would never fully recover. But at least they had a chance now. At least someone had fought for them. 2 weeks later, Eliza stood in the governor's office with Caleb and Eli, signing the final papers that transferred Caleb's shares to a trust that would be managed by people Matthews trusted. People who would run the railroad ethically, who would put workers' lives above profit. What will you do now? Matthews asked. Caleb looked at Eliza. Go home. Build something. Maybe raise some horses. Maybe just exist for a while without running. And you, Miss Rowan? Same. Go home. Fix my fence properly this time. She smiled slightly. Maybe have some company for a change. Matthews stood, shaking both their hands. If you ever need anything, you know where to find me. They left Helena on a clear spring morning. The snow was melting, turning the trails to mud, but there were flowers starting to push through the ground. Signs of life returning. The ride back to Iron Ridge took a week. Eli chattered the whole way, pointing out birds and asking endless questions about what they'd do when they got there. Caleb rode beside Eliza, occasionally reaching over to take her hand. When they finally crested the ridge and saw the cabin below, Eliza's breath caught. It looked the same, weathered, stubborn, small against the vast mountain. But it felt different. It felt like home. They spent the first weeks cleaning, repairing, preparing. Caleb fixed the fence properly, then built an addition to the cabin. 2 small rooms, one for Eli and one for storage. Eliza planted a garden, something she'd never bothered with before because what was the point of growing things for one person? But there were 3 of them now. Eli thrived. He grew taller, filled out, laughed more easily. He started helping with the chores without being asked, learned to handle an axe, began reading from the few books Eliza owned. Sometimes he still woke up screaming from nightmares about the mine. But Caleb was always there, holding him until the fear passed. One night in late summer, as they sat on the porch watching the sunset, Eli asked, "Are we a family now?" Caleb and Eliza looked at each other. "Yes," Caleb said, "if you want to be." "I want to be." "Then we are." It was that simple, that complicated, that real. In the fall, they rode down to Coldwater to see Sheriff Briggs and get supplies. The town had changed, new buildings going up, new people arriving. Word had spread about the mine closure, about Hale's arrest, about the children who'd been saved. Some people thanked Eliza, some looked at her like she'd caused trouble. She didn't care either way. Briggs pulled her aside before they left. "Heard you and Harrison are making it official." "Officially what?" "Getting married." Eliza blinked. "Where did you hear that?" "Small town. People talk." He grinned. "So is it true?" She hadn't actually thought about it, but standing there thinking about Caleb and Eli and the life they were building, she realized it didn't matter whether there was a ceremony or not. They were already committed, already bound. "Maybe," she said. "Eventually. Your father would approve for what it's worth." "It's worth a lot." That winter was different from the ones before. The cabin was full of noise and warmth and life. Caleb taught Eli to carve wood. Eliza taught them both to cook properly. They celebrated small things: first snow, clear nights, days without work. And on Christmas Eve, Caleb asked Eliza to marry him. It wasn't romantic. They were feeding the horses, and Eli was inside making dinner, and Caleb just turned to her and said, "I want this forever. Do you?" "Yes." "Then marry me." "Okay." They got married in the spring, under an open sky with just Eli and Briggs as witnesses. Sarah rode up from her cabin to cook the meal. Matthew sent a letter of congratulations and a land deed, a gift, securing Eliza's property permanently. It wasn't a fancy wedding. There were no crowds, no ceremony, no grand declarations, just two people choosing each other and a boy who'd found a family and a meal shared with friends. But it was enough. It was more than enough. That summer, Eliza realized she was pregnant. The news terrified her. She'd never thought about being a mother, never imagined herself in that role. But Caleb's joy was so complete and Eli's excitement so genuine that the fear faded into something else. Hope. The baby came in early spring, a daughter with Caleb's dark hair and Eliza's stubborn chin. They named her Grace because that's what she was: unearned, unexpected, a gift they hadn't known to ask for. Eli took to being a big brother like he'd been born for it. He held Grace carefully, showed her the mountains, promised to teach her everything he knew. And Caleb came back to life. The haunted look in his eyes faded. The tension in his shoulders eased. He smiled more, laughed more, became the man he'd probably been before loss had carved him hollow. One evening, as they sat on the porch watching Eli chase fireflies while Grace slept against Eliza's shoulder, Caleb spoke quietly. "I thought my life was over. When I lost them, my wife, my daughter, I thought there was nothing left worth living for. But there was. He looked at her. "You saved me, Eliza. You and Eli. You gave me a reason to stop running. You saved yourself. I just opened a door. That's all anyone can do. Open doors. Hope someone walks through." He took her hand. "Thank you for walking through mine." Eliza thought about that night in the storm, about 3 knocks that changed everything, about the choice to help instead of hide, about all the ways one decision could ripple outward, changing not just one life, but many. "I'd do it again," she said, "every time." Years passed. Eli grew into a young man, strong and kind, who never forgot where he came from or who'd saved him. Grace grew wild and fearless, climbing trees and demanding stories. They added more rooms to the cabin, got more horses, built a life that was messy and loud and full. Sometimes people came to Iron Ridge asking about them. The woman who'd stood up to Victor Hale, the railroad heir who'd given everything up, the boy who'd survived the mines. Eliza always told them the same thing. They were just people. People who'd chosen each other. People who'd fought for what mattered. Nothing more, nothing less. And that was enough. Because the truth about survival, Eliza had learned, wasn't about how well you could isolate yourself. It was about who you let in, who you fought for, who you chose to love even when love meant risk. Her father had been right. The day you stop seeing people in trouble is the day you stop being people yourself. She'd opened her door in a storm and found a family and lost nothing and gained everything. Sometimes, late at night, when the cabin was quiet and everyone was sleeping, Eliza would stand at the door and look out at the mountain, the same mountain that had been her prison, her protection, her whole world for so long. It was still all those things, but it was also her home now, really home. Not just a place to survive, but a place to live. And when the wind howled and the snow fell and the darkness pressed close, she didn't feel alone anymore. She felt found. 3 knocks in a blizzard. That's all it took to destroy everything she thought she knew about survival, and build something better in its place.